You ever walk into a room, and before you even speak, someone sizes you up and decides they don't have to respect you? It's not what you said, it's not what you wore, it's something deeper, something unspoken, and you feel it, that quiet dismissal, that smirk, that subtle way they talk over you, question your competence, or pretend you're not even there. Now let me tell you something most people never learn. The way the world treats you is often a direct reflection of what you tolerate. Disrespect doesn't start with words, it starts with energy. It's how you walk, how you hold your eyes, how you respond to pressure. If you flinch, if you apologize for existing, if you shrink when someone tries to dominate you, they feel it. And they will push further. So what do? You stop explaining yourself to people who don't respect you. You stop over-delivering for those who underappreciate you. You stop laughing when something's not funny just to be liked. You stop seeking approval from those who wouldn't give it even if you earned it 1,000 times. You teach people how to treat you. Not through your words, but through your boundaries. When someone tests you, and they will, you don't react emotionally, you don't argue. You look them in the eye and you stay still, because control isn't loud. Real power whispers. And when you know your worth, you don't have to raise your voice. Your presence does the speaking. People confuse kindness with weakness. They confuse humility with submission. And the moment they do, you correct them. Not with anger, not with insults, but with standards. You make it clear, this is how I expect to be spoken to. This is what I will not accept. And if that's too much for you, there's the door. And here's the truth, the first time you do this, it'll feel terrifying. You'll think you're risking something. You're not. You're reclaiming something. Respect doesn't come when you're nice. It doesn't come when you're loud. It comes when you're rooted. When you don't chase validation. When your silence becomes more powerful than their noise, you want people to stop disrespecting you. Then stop disrespecting yourself by staying silent, by playing small, by bending for approval you don't need. You do this, and I promise you, no one will ever look at you the same way again. You ever notice how some people get talked over, interrupted, dismissed, while others walk in, say almost nothing, and everyone pays attention? It's not luck. It's not status. It's not how loud you speak or how impressive your is. It's what you project. And more importantly, what you permit. See, the truth most people don't want to hear is this. People treat you based on the standard you set. If you allow disrespect, you teach them it's acceptable. If you tolerate being overlooked, you're silently saying, this is okay. You're not being humble. You're not being polite. You're being passive, and passivity is the breeding ground of disrespect. People will always test you, consciously or unconsciously. They're watching. They're calculating. Can I push this person? Will they fold? Will they bite their tongue just to keep the peace? And when they see that you will, they don't think, wow, how mature. They think, got it, I can walk all over them. That's human nature. We are wired to read power dynamics instinctively. It starts small, a sarcastic jab, a dismissive tone, talking over you in meetings, dismissing your opinion with a smile that says, you don't matter here. And if you stay quiet, if you let it go to avoid being too sensitive or too much, you've just set the standard. You've just signed an invisible contract that says, this is who I am. This is what I accept. And from that moment on, you're not being disrespected by accident. You're being disrespected by design. Because people feel what they can get away with. And that's exactly the part most people miss. Disrespect doesn't usually start with words. It starts with energy. It's something primal, nonverbal. The second you walk into a room, before you say a single word, people are already reading you. They're scanning the way you carry yourself, the way your eyes move, how you stand when you're not speaking. Are your shoulders back? Are your movements deliberate? Or are you folding in on yourself, trying not to take up too much space, trying to go unnoticed so you don't cause waves? They see it. They feel it. And if your energy whispers uncertainty, if it says, I don't want trouble, I just want to be liked, then guess what? That's exactly the button they'll press. Not because they're evil, not because they're out to get you, but because human beings respond to hierarchy. Confidence is a signal, so is weakness. And when your energy gives away your position before your words even catch up, you've already lost the room. I want you to understand something deeply. The strongest people don't always speak the most, but their silence carries weight. Their stillness commands attention. Why? Because their energy says, I belong here. I don't need to prove it. They don't fidget. They don't apologize with their posture. They don't look down when questioned. They don't speed up their voice to fill awkward silences. They know that the space they take up is earned, not by noise, but by presence. You can't fake that. You can't fake the energy of someone who respects themselves so much that they refuse to shrink for anyone. That kind of presence makes people think twice before speaking down to you. It makes them hesitate before trying to challenge you. Because power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. Think about the last time someone made you feel small. Not by yelling at you, but by how they looked at you. Or how they ignored you. That wasn't about what they said. That was energy. Disrespect, at its core, starts with a shift in tone, a change in posture, a look that says, I don't think you matter. And the moment you sense it, that's your moment of truth. Because if you stay still, if you hold eye contact, if your energy says, I noticed, and I don't flinch, that shift dies right there. It doesn't escalate. But if you shrink, if you nervously laugh, if you act like you didn't notice, they'll try it again. And this time worse. We teach people how far they can go with us, not with our mouths, but with our energy, with our body language, with what we radiate without speaking. That's why emotional composure isn't optional, it's survival. People who keep their power don't give their emotional reactions away for free. They don't flinch when someone raises their voice. They don't stumble when someone challenges them. Their pulse doesn't spike every time someone pushes back. Because they've built a baseline calm, alert, steady. And when your baseline energy is calm and strong, people feel it. They feel that there's a wall there, not a wall of arrogance, but a wall of inner strength, a limit, a signal that says I respect myself too much to be pulled into your chaos. That kind of energy. It makes the people who think about disrespecting you second guess themselves. So the next time you walk into a room, stop thinking about what you're going to say to get respect. Start thinking about what your energy says before you speak. Are you grounded? Are you fully present? Or are you carrying fear, insecurity, doubt? Because people pick up on that faster than any words you could ever say. Power doesn't start with dominance. It starts with stillness. Power doesn't start with dominance. It starts with stillness. And the reason so many people get disrespected again and again is because they constantly give their power away with two things. Over-explaining and over-apologizing. They try to earn permission to exist. They try to justify their place at the table. And let me be very clear, when you constantly explain yourself, what you're really doing is asking for approval from people who've already decided they don't respect you. You walk into a room, you give an idea, and then you start back. I mean, I don't know if it's good, but I just thought maybe. Right there, you've weakened your own voice. You've added disclaimers. You've handed your authority to someone else on a silver platter. Why? Because deep down you're still trying to be liked. You're still negotiating your value. And that negotiation, it tells everyone, I'm not sure I belong here either. Every time you explain yourself to someone who hasn't earned that level of access, you lower the standard. Every time you apologize for things that require no apology, you signal guilt for simply existing. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. You say sorry for speaking too confidently. You say sorry for taking up time, space, or attention. And whether you realize it or not, that behavior tells people you're beneath them. And let me tell you something. People don't respect what's always seeking approval. They respect what stands firm. They respect certainty, not arrogance. Not volume, but clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't need to follow every statement with, does that make sense? Or, I hope that's okay. When you speak, own it. Not because you're better, but because you're solid. Now that doesn't mean you don't explain your reasoning when it matters. It doesn't mean you don't take accountability when you're wrong. What it means is you stop using words as shields. You stop pouring out explanations to people who aren't asking to understand you. They're just looking for cracks in your. Because the moment they see you explaining yourself too much, they smell insecurity. And the moment they start testing your boundaries, So the next time you catch yourself rambling, over-justifying, trying to prove you're worthy of someone's respect, stop. Breathe, say less. Let your words carry weight, not just noise. And let your silence speak when necessary. Because people who truly hold power don't beg for validation. They don't dress their truth up in 10 layers of explanation. They say it, and they stand behind it. Not because they're loud, but because they're grounded. And that's what changes how people respond to you. When your words come from conviction instead of insecurity, you shift the room. When you speak without apology, you stop asking for permission and start commanding presence. And that shift, that's where respect begins. And that shift, that's where respect begins. Because once you stop asking for permission to take up space, something incredible happens. You stop depending on anyone else to tell you who you are. And that's the next trap most people fall into without even realizing it. They treat approval like oxygen. They act like they can't breathe without someone nodding at them, saying, "Good job, you're okay now. You're enough." But let me ask you something. What happens when that approval doesn't come? What happens when no one claps for you? When no one validates your choices? When the room stays quiet even after you've given it everything you've got? Does your confidence collapse? Do you shrink? Do you start second, guessing everything? If the answer is yes, then that means your worth is being held hostage by people who may never give you the validation you think you need, and that's a dangerous place to live. Because it means your identity is always up for negotiation. It means every compliment inflates you and every criticism shatters you. That's not strength. That's dependence. And here's what I need you to understand. People can sense when you're operating from a place of need. They can feel when you're chasing their approval. And some of them, whether they realize it or not, will manipulate that need. They'll withhold respect to keep control. They'll dangle recognition like bait just to watch you jump for it. But when you cut the cord, when you stop needing approval to feel whole, you become untouchable. You walk into that room not hoping to be chosen, but knowing you already belong. You speak not to impress, but to express. And whether people agree with you, applaud you, or ignore you, it doesn't shake your core, because your sense of self isn't up for rent. You own it. You see, confidence isn't loud. It's quiet. It's not about dominating others. It's about no longer being dominated by your own need to be liked. And let's be honest, that need is strong, especially in a world that teaches us, from day one, to seek gold stars, followers, likes, validation. But if you're not careful, you'll start trading your values for approval. You'll start yourself into what others want to see, instead of standing in who you really are. And people will pick up on that. They'll see you shifting, performing, compromising just to fit, and they won't respect it, they'll use it. Because when you seek approval more than you seek truth, you become easy to influence, easy to manipulate, easy to dismiss. But when you stop needing the pat on the back, when you stop looking outside yourself for proof that you matter, everything changes. That's when your energy becomes steady. That's when your words stop trembling. That's when your presence starts speaking louder than anything you say. Because real power doesn't come from being liked, it comes from being grounded. Rooted in the truth that you are already enough, even if no one says it out loud. So stop waiting for someone to validate you. Stop needing the applause. Stop trading your truth for approval, because the moment you do that, you stop being someone who needs respect, and you start being someone who commands it. Because the moment you do that, you stop being someone who needs respect, and you start being someone who commands it. And when that shift happens, something else becomes non-negotiable: your boundaries. You stop explaining. You stop performing. But more importantly, you start enforcing a standard, quietly, consistently, because people don't listen to what you say your boundaries are. They respond to how you enforce them. Let me tell you something about boundaries. They don't have to be aggressive. They don't need to come with shouting, threats, or ultimatums. In fact, the most effective boundaries are the ones spoken calmly, held firmly, and backed by action. They say, "I don't need to raise my voice. I just won't allow this behavior." That's it, simple, direct, and absolutely immovable. You want to stop being disrespected. Then you need to be willing to draw a line and mean it. You need to be okay with making people uncomfortable. You need to accept that not everyone will like you, especially when you stop letting them get away with things. But here's the truth. They were never going to respect you anyway, if you kept allowing them to cross the line unchecked. They were just going to keep pushing. People test you, not always out of malice, but to see where the edge is, where the no lives. And if you don't show them where that is, they assume you don't have one. That's not their fault. That's yours. Because boundaries aren't things you declare once and forget about. They're commitments you uphold, even when it's hard, even when it's awkward, even when it risks conflict. Especially then, most people don't lack confidence. They lack boundaries. They allow disrespect, and then complain about not being treated fairly. But fairness doesn't come from hope. It comes from clarity. It comes from saying, this is how I expect to be treated. And if you can't meet that, I will remove myself. You don't need to scream that. You don't need to put it in flashing lights. You just need to follow through. Once. And people get it. And here's the thing, the first time you do this, it will shake your system. You'll feel guilt. Fear. You'll wonder if you're overreacting. You're not. That's just your old conditioning trying to keep the peace. That's your habit of self-betrayal speaking up. Because you've spent years tolerating too much, letting things slide, excusing bad behavior in the name of being understanding. But being understanding does not mean being a doormat. Empathy does not mean erasing yourself. So when you finally draw a line, when you say, no, you don't get to speak to me that way, or no, I don't owe you access to me just because you want it, or no, I won't sit here and pretend that behavior is okay. That's when everything changes. Not just in how they treat you, but in how you treat yourself. Because boundaries don't just protect you from others, they protect your identity. Every time you enforce a boundary, you remind yourself of your value. You reinforce the message that says, I am not here to be tolerated. I am here to be respected. And that message doesn't just resonate outward, it goes inward. It reshapes how you walk, how you carry yourself, how you speak. And people feel that. They feel when someone knows their worth, not in theory, but in practice. So you don't need to be mean. You don't need to get loud. You just need to get clear. Clarity is power. And when your boundaries are clear and backed by action, the people who can't handle it will fall away, and the ones who respect it will step up. That's how you change the room without ever raising your voice. That's how you change the room without ever raising your voice. Because power, real power, doesn't flinch. It doesn't shake. It doesn't panic the moment it's challenged. And that brings us to something most people completely overlook when it comes to respect your reactions. Specifically, your emotional reactivity. See, people who are easily triggered are easy to control. That's just the truth. If I can push your buttons with a look, a tone, a word, then I own you in that moment. I don't even have to overpower you physically. I just have to make you lose your center. And the second you do, you've handed me all your control. That's why emotional discipline is everything. The ability to not react when someone's trying to provoke you. That's what separates strong people from people who pretend to be strong. Because anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can get angry. But not everyone can stay calm under pressure. Not everyone can look a disrespectful person in the eye and say absolutely nothing. Not because they're afraid, but because they're in control. And control isn't about shutting down or becoming cold. It's about becoming deliberate. It's about deciding how and when you respond, not reacting out of impulse or insecurity. When you don't react emotionally, you keep your power. You hold the frame. And whoever holds the frame leads the interaction. People respect composure. They don't always say it out loud, but they feel it. Because in a world where most people are emotionally volatile, the one who stays calm becomes the anchor. And the anchor holds influence. So when someone disrespects you, when they raise their voice, question your worth, or try to make you feel small, the worst thing you can do is let them see they've gotten to you. Because now, they know exactly where to hit next time. But when you stay still, when your face doesn't twitch, when your tone doesn't change, when your pulse doesn't spike, you send a message that's louder than any comeback. You tell them, you don't move me. You don't own space in my mind. You don't get to dictate how I feel. And that message, that shuts them down. Not because you hurt them, but because you didn't need to. The most dangerous people in the room aren't the loud ones. They're the calm ones. The ones who speak little and move with precision. The ones who don't get baited. Because they're not playing defense. They're playing chess. They're 5 moves ahead while everyone else is throwing punches in the dark. And you can become that person. Not by faking stoicism, but by training your nervous system to stop giving everything away. By noticing the moment someone tries to trigger you. And instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe, you observe, you hold the space, and then you decide what happens next. Because when you stop giving people access to your emotional responses, you take away their power. And what's left in that space? Authority, presence, leadership, and yes, respect, because people might not always agree with you, they might not always like you, but they will learn not to mess with you when they realize their tactics don't work anymore. That's how you lead without raising your voice. That's how you set a tone without making a scene, by choosing to stay calm, no matter how much chaos someone tries to throw at you. Because silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Stillness isn't passive, it's decisive. And emotional control, that's not just confidence, it's command. Because emotional control, that's not just confidence, it's command. And when you truly step into that level of command, you unlock one of the most underestimated weapons of influence: silence. Silence is not emptiness. It's not avoidance. It's not weakness. Silence is presence. Silence is precision. And most people are terrified of it. They talk to fill space. They talk to prove something. They talk because they think if they stop, they'll lose control of the conversation. But silence is control. When it's intentional. When you're the one holding it. When you let the silence hang in the air just long enough to make the other person lean in, wonder what you're thinking, question themselves. That's power. That's strategy. That's influence. When you use silence with purpose, people start paying attention. Because it creates tension, and tension forces clarity. Most people crumble under silence because it demands they confront something uncomfortable. Their own insecurity, their own disrespect, or their own inability to manipulate you. And when you don't rush to fill that space, when you allow the discomfort to hang, it becomes a mirror. A mirror that makes people see themselves, their behavior, their tone. You don't need to talk over people to gain respect. You don't need to argue to win a point. You don't need to always have the last word. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing, to look someone in the eye and let the silence speak for you. Because silence says, I'm not here to entertain disrespect. Silence says, you're not worth my reaction. Silence says, I'm measured, I'm aware, and I don't flinch under pressure. When someone tries to bait you into a reaction, whether it's with sarcasm, arrogance, or even passive-aggressive behavior, don't respond right away. Let it land, let it echo, let it hang there between you unanswered. That silence, that pause, that's the difference between someone who's reactive and someone who's in full control of the space. It unnerves people. It throws them off. Because they're not used to someone who doesn't need to defend, to explain, to justify. They're used to noise, not poise. And this isn't just about confrontation. Silence is power in every environment. In negotiations, in relationships, in leadership. The person who speaks less but says more, who waits before responding, who doesn't race to fill gaps. They dominate the dynamic without aggression. They don't dominate people. They dominate the moment. You don't need to speak constantly to assert yourself. In fact, the more you talk just to be heard, the less power your words hold. But when you're silent, strategically silent, your words start to matter more. They land harder, they stay longer, because you've made space for them to carry weight. Think of the most commanding people you've ever encountered. They didn't rush. They didn't overshare. They weren't constantly trying to prove their intelligence or justify their presence. They were calm, deliberate, comfortable and quiet. And because of that, when they did speak, people listened. That's the kind of power that comes not from volume, but from restraint. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their chaos with words, remember, your silence is not a retreat, it's a stance. It's a signal, and often it's the loudest thing in the room. And often it's the loudest thing in the room. Because silence, when paired with self-respect, becomes a force that no one can ignore. But let's be real, people will test you not just with noise, but with charm, with flattery, with friendliness that disguises their lack of respect. They'll smile in your face while trying to chip away at your value. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think that being kind means tolerating bad behavior. They think that in order to be liked, they have to stay quiet, forgive quickly, and let things slide. Kindness is not weakness. But people will confuse the two if you don't make the distinction clear. You can be kind and still say no. You can be kind and still walk away. You can be kind and still call someone out when they cross a line. That's real strength. That's integrity. And that's exactly the kind of strength people remember. Not the person who always smiles, always nods, always makes things comfortable, but the person who's calm, composed, respectful, and completely shakeable when it matters. See, weakness doesn't come from kindness. It comes from inconsistency. It comes from saying you value yourself, but never enforcing it. It comes from wanting to be respected, but being too afraid to risk being disliked. So you fold. You let people talk over you. You let them make jokes at your expense. You brush it off, telling yourself it's not worth the fight. But every time you do that, you train them to see you as less. And eventually, they will. If someone thinks your kindness is an invitation to test your limits, it's not your job to get louder. It's your job to get clearer. To stand firm and let them know, just because I lead with respect doesn't mean I'll tolerate disrespect. And that clarity, spoken with calm conviction, is more powerful than any emotional outburst, because it's backed by alignment. When your behavior matches your words, people take notice. And when your boundaries match your self-respect, people think twice before crossing them. You don't have to choose between being kind and being strong. You shouldn't. That's the myth. The real power is when both live together in you. When you can walk into a room, lead with grace, listen with patience, and still command the respect of everyone around you. Because they know, they feel, that under your kindness is steel, not rage, not ego, but strength that doesn't waver. That's what earns long-term respect. Not fear, not control, but the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that sets the tone by example. The kind that's built on discipline, boundaries, and clarity. So no, you don't have to be harsh to be powerful. You don't have to be mean to be respected. You just have to mean what you say and show up in every moment like someone who knows exactly who they are. Because when you do that, you don't lose kindness, you elevate it. You make it clear that kindness is not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength that's rooted in deep, shakeable self-respect. And when that kind of energy walks into a room, people pay attention, not because they're afraid of you, but because they know better than to take you lightly. Not because they're afraid of you, but because they know better than to take you lightly. Because by now, they've learned that your presence isn't accidental. It's earned. It's built on standards that are not up for negotiation. And if someone chooses to ignore those standards, you don't argue. You don't beg. You don't get emotional. You correct them. Firmly, clearly, and without hesitation. Correction doesn't require aggression. You don't have to scream to make a point. You don't have to threaten, insult, or tear someone down to draw the line. You just have to be direct. And that's where most people go wrong. They either suppress their feelings until they explode, or they let disrespect slide while pretending it doesn't affect them. But here's the truth, Og. When you fail to correct someone who's treating you poorly, you're silently giving them permission to keep doing it. Every time you stay silent when someone crosses a line, you reinforce the idea that you're someone who can be dismissed, minimized, or disrespected. Not with force, not with violence, just with subtle, habitual disregard. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to change, because the standard has already been set. But the good news, you can reset that standard at any time. Not with drama, not with emotion, just with truth. You don't have to match their tone. You don't have to play their game. You just calmly say, "That's not acceptable. That doesn't work for me. I don't tolerate being spoken to that way." And then you follow through. You back it up with action. You create distance. You end the conversation. You remove access. Because what you allow is what continues, and what you reinforce becomes your identity. Now, some people won't like it. Some will get defensive. They'll call you difficult, intense, too serious. Let them. That's a reflection of their discomfort, not your wrongdoing. You're not here to keep people comfortable. You're here to keep yourself respected. And if they can't respect a direct boundary delivery with calm authority, they were never going to respect you in the first place. They were just hoping you'd let it slide. You want to change how people treat you. Start correcting them the first time they test you. Don't wait. Don't sugarcoat it. You don't need to explain why your boundary exists. You don't need to justify how you feel. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to expect decency. And you're allowed to walk away from anyone who refuses to meet that. The way you correct someone sets the tone for how they show up next time. If you do it with fear, they sense hesitation. If you do it with anger, they see emotional instability. But when you do it with calm certainty, they feel structure. They feel strength. They understand you are not someone to push. And even if they don't say it out loud, they get the message. Respect is the only currency that works with you. Not charm, not manipulation, not intimidation, just respect. And if they can't give that, then they lose access. No debate. No fight. Just a clear decision rooted in your self-worth. That's the kind of authority that doesn't need backup. It stands on its own, because it's built on truth, on boundaries, and on action. And when you live that way, when you respond to disrespect with correction instead of compliance, you stop participating in cycles that drain you. You stop being the person who constantly gets walked on. You stop explaining yourself to people who never really cared. You start protecting your peace with discipline, and that is the beginning of real freedom. And that is the beginning of real freedom. Because the moment you stop tolerating what drains you, you begin reinforcing what defines you. And nothing defines you more than the relationship you have with yourself. If you want people to respect you, it has to start from within. You can't demand from others what you deny yourself every single day. And that's what most people don't realize. Self-respect sets the tone for all external respect. You can talk tough. You can dress sharp. You can post quotes about boundaries all day. But if your actions betray your words, people won't follow your lead. They'll walk right over you. Because deep down, they can see it. They can feel when you don't really believe in your own worth. They can sense when your standards are flexible, when your confidence is borrowed, when your voice is trembling behind forced authority. And when you don't respect yourself, you tolerate behaviors that erode you. You accept apologies without change. You excuse the inexcusable. You give access to people who drain you, hoping they'll eventually treat you right. But they won't, because they're responding to your lead. You're teaching them that your time isn't valuable, that your presence isn't sacred, that your peace is up for grabs. You have to ask yourself, what do I keep allowing in my life that I would never accept for someone I love? Because if you wouldn't let your best spoken to the way someone speaks to you, why are you tolerating it? If you wouldn't want your sister, your brother, your child to feel drained, disrespected, or unsafe in a relationship or environment, then why are you normalizing that behavior for yourself? Self-respect is not just about what you walk away from. It's also about what you walk toward. It's about the decisions you make when no one is watching. The way you keep your promises to yourself. The way you speak to yourself in the mirror. The way you show up for your own standards even when it's uncomfortable. You want people to listen when you speak. Start listening to yourself. Honor your intuition. Follow through on your boundaries. Show the world what it looks like when someone refuses to abandon themselves for the sake of fitting in or keeping the peace. Because the world doesn't respect noise. It respects alignment. It respects consistency. And it respects the people who live what they expect from others. When you carry yourself like someone who values their own energy, time, and emotional space, you don't have to announce it. People just know. They adjust. They show up differently, because your presence has weight. It has edges. It says, this is who I am. This is what I allow. And if that's too much, I'll still sleep just fine at night. That's what self-respect does. It silences manipulation. It filters out the people who only showed up because they thought you'd bend. It repels chaos. And most of all, it teaches you how to stand alone without shrinking. Because when you've got your own back, when you truly like who you are, people feel it. And whether they love you, hate you, or don't understand you, one thing becomes clear, and they have to respect you. Not because you demanded it, but because you live it. every single day, quietly, relentlessly, without compromise. And that's the truth most people miss. Respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you embody. It's not about dominating others, raising your voice, or demanding attention. It's about showing up every single day with the discipline to protect your peace, the courage to enforce your boundaries, and the strength to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your worth. Because once you stop explaining yourself, once you stop needing approval, once you start correcting disrespect without apology and honoring yourself without exception, people notice, not just the loud ones, not just the difficult ones, everyone. They begin to understand that with you, the line is clear, the standard is high, and the cost of crossing it is losing access. So don't lower yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. Don't beg for recognition from people who benefit from keeping you small. And don't ever forget, how you treat yourself teaches the world how to treat you. Set the tone, own the space, and never, ever apologize for demanding the kind of respect you've already given to yourself.